Hey, Florida homeowners, do you currently have flood insurance? Today I'm here with Justin with Brightway Insurance to get to the bottom of who should get flood insurance and when it's safe to pass.
Okay, so this is a large question on me to answer. So flood insurance is rising water that enters the home from the outside in. So there are two types of flood zones. There's a mandated FEMA flood zone, which is usually an AE, VE, or A flood zone. That is when FEMA mandates and requires that you carry flood insurance if you have a mortgage. Then there's a separate X zone, which is an optional flood insurance zone. So at that point, for any homeowner, even if you have a mortgage or not, flood insurance would be optional. However, the way that I like to preface this is the entire state of Florida, in my opinion, is technically in a flood zone because if you think about it, we sit on water as a state. That's why the aquifer is beneath us. We're surrounded by water on three sides as a state, and then we sit below sea level naturally. And then not to mention in Jacksonville alone, we have the intercoastal, the ocean, and all types of retention ponds and man-made lakes. And because of that, it's very important that every homeowner should truly think about obtaining flood insurance. At the most, if you're not required to carry it, it's $600, $700 a year. So to answer your initial question, yes, flood insurance is highly recommended, whether you're required to carry it or not.
And another quick question, I know you mentioned the price, but what is the typical range to insure a standard, let's say 2,000 square foot home for just flood insurance?
So I'll answer that in two parts. So recently, I would say in the last 4 years, FEMA updated how they determine flood rates. So prior to October 2021, how they determined them was two ways. If you were in a high-risk flood zone, like an AE, you would need an elevation certificate in order to get a flood insurance quote or rate, because they would measure the rate based on the elevations. Whereas if you weren't required to carry it, you were in X zone, you'd pay $480 a year. However, FEMA got together in 2021 and said, we are significantly undercharging for risk based on location. So we would have homes that are literally on the ocean or intercoastal that FEMA didn't require flood insurance or deemed them to be high risk. So if that person wanted flood insurance, they would pay $480 a year. Yet someone in the middle of the state, let's say in Orlando in the middle of the woods, they would pay $480 a year. So basically FEMA said, why should someone on the ocean pay the same as someone in the middle of the woods? So now it's determined based on a single risk modeling system. So homes that are closer to the beach, coast, intercoastal, lower lying areas are going to see a higher rate than someone that's more inland. So that's a tough question to answer because it's all determined on the location of the home. But I've seen rates anywhere from $489 a year for someone who's not in a flood zone to $1,000 a year, depending on the location. So if it's within your budget, I would highly recommend getting it.
Definitely. And I think the biggest misconception is that people think it's thousands